a lot of the surprise in the borrowing market wasn't because the deficit was 6.4 versus 6%. It was the composition of that borrowing. That market borrowing was much higher, small savings were budgeted much lower. So in theory, if you had had the deficit of 6.4, but the same small savings as last year, you would have had gross borrowing in the 12 handle, not in the 14 handle, and the reaction would be different. But let me make a broader point about the bond market. I know there's a lot of hand wringing about where rates are. We should not be comparing nominal rates now to nominal rates before the pandemic, because there's been a big change in inflation and inflation expectations. And let me just give you a data point here. 10-year real yields today, if you deflate it by core inflation, at about 1.4%. The nominal yield is 6.9. Core inflation is stabilized around 5.5. Do you know, for the 4 years before the pandemic, those 10-year real yields used to average 2.4%. So in real terms, I know even though bond markets have got a lot of angst, real yields in the bond market, 10-year yields, are 100 basis points lower today than they were before the pandemic. So I think comparing nominal yields is fallacious, because inflation has increased by 150 basis points, core inflation has, and inflation expectations are higher. And ultimately, it's real yields that matter. The second point I'll say, just on the bond market, since we're here, is it's a very steep curve, but what is the curve telling us? The curve has two elements to it. And I think by calling bond markets irrational, I think we're just trivializing more fundamental issues. Yeah. One is the 10-year yield is telling us what markets expect will be future overnight policy rates. Yeah. And then there's a term premium. Let's hold the term premium constant. What yield curves are telling us is they expect, given where inflation in India is, that policy rates and overnight rates will actually increase. And that's why the curve is steep, right? So if you look at the one-year bond, the 2-year bond, all of them are suggesting that they expect policy rates to be increased in the next couple of years. And that accounts for the steepness of the curve. So number one, let's look at real yields. Number two, all of this is not term premium. A lot of this is just expectations that as global rates are going up, the central bank will have to raise overnight rates. And when monetary cycles start, curves tend to become more steep. And as monetary policy starts raising rates, curves tend to flatten. But the last point I'll make is there's also a term premium component. But this is a discussion we've had several times over before the pandemic. Why is the yield curve so steep? And it again goes back to fundamental issues. When household financial savings fall by 300 basis points over a decade, and public sector borrowing requirements go up, ex ante, interest rates, equilibrium prices will adjust and rates will be higher. So that's the term element part, that there's a lot of borrowing in recent years against a backdrop of lower household financial. So I think there are many issues that are encompassed in what yields are telling us.